This is why the front office people, you just never know where they're coming from. And you don't know what their backgrounds are until you start reading their resumes. And then you see who they've been around and what teams they've been on. And quite frankly, you can't argue with either one of these guys and where they've come from. So Buffalo has been rebuilding for about 4 or 5 years. And this guy, Shane, has been right in the middle of all of that. Now, they got lucky. Josh Allen fell to them.
Yeah.
I look at Poles, and Poles, has been around Andy Reid. He's been quiet. Nobody really knows who he is. He's probably one of those guys that, he's a former offensive lineman at Boston College, by the way, and he was a teammate of Matt Ryan. So he's been around football. He knows football. The Boston College connection, I always tell you.
Yeah, with the Giants.
There's something there. And that's why, Brian Flores is a little bit older than Poles is. So
he's only 36, Ryan Poles, right?
Yeah. So I could see that pairing too. Who knows? I mean, this is the interesting part of what's going on right now with the Giants. If they trot one of those guys out there, they will have come from good places.
Yeah.
That have good players, good rosters, and that's really what their job is. Their job is to evaluate the roster, decide, who stays, who goes, and then hopefully have an enormous impact when it comes to the draft.
Is it fair to say, though, that you're looking at two organizations and deputies in the front office of these two organizations that essentially are really good because they got lucky with a quarterback and they've got a good head coach?
Well, I do think for Buffalo and Brandon Beane, their GM, he hired Sean McDermott. Nobody really, people in the NFL knew who Sean McDermott was. He comes from the Jim Johnson tree of Philadelphia defense.
Uh-huh.
And, he had a nice run down there in Carolina. And then Brandon Beane came with him. It's just like, that's what you're trying to find. You're trying to find the next really energetic head coach is what you're trying to find. And you're also trying to find a guy. Look, there's a lot of pressure on whoever comes in here as GM because the Giant fans. What are they looking at next? They're looking at the draft.
Yeah, of course.
And the draft, because of some of the mistakes that Dave Gettleman made over the last 4 years, is going to be really important to the Giant fan and to the Giant organization moving forward, especially with 2 first-round picks. Here's the thing about having a guy that has never been in that seat before. Do they trade? Don't they trade? Do they trade down and pick up more picks?
How aggressive is that guy going to be?
Yeah, so like a guy like Rick Spielman, on the other hand, has been through 15 years of drafts.
How come nobody's interviewing him anymore? Is it just like if people think he's a has-been or something? I don't know.
Either that or maybe he just wants to take a year off.
He could.
You don't know. So,
yeah.
But again, this is the difference between having a guy with experience and having a guy that basically has been around really good people making decisions. And both of these guys they both come from great organizations and stable organizations right now, especially because of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. It's interesting. I'm going to interview Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals for the NFL today.
All right, nice.
So just
got to ask him about his craps playing.
Well, I will. I'm just looking. I only have 3 minutes. It's not game time.
Okay.
As I was told.
All right.
So anyway, looking through like his history and things of that nature. Do you realize his first 2 years in Cincinnati, maybe nobody around here knows this because nobody really cares.
They weren't so good.
Right. So 6 wins in his first two seasons.
Well, he got a pass, though, in the second year because of the Joe Burrow injury.
But he actually said after the game where they beat the Raiders this past Saturday, one game ball is going to Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals. And the reason he did that was because he said, if I were in any other organization, I would have most likely been fired after my second year.
Oh, well, certainly with the Giants, he would have been.
Yeah, but again, they also won the lottery in his second year. They won the lottery because they got Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow got hurt that year.
Yeah.
So they had like parallel paths. 2019, he takes over from Marvin Lewis. They go 2-14. They end up getting the number 1 pick. 2019 is when Joe Burrow is ascending as the best player in college football at LSU. And then, of course, they have the first pick. They take Joe, and the whole thing changes. And it has changed significantly. But realizing that Zach Taylor he's got something in common with Ricky Williams, Vince Young, Kyler Murray, and Baker Mayfield. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Big 12 Player of the Year.
Oh, interesting.
He was a quarterback at the University of Nebraska. He grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, Oklahoma didn't want him. He went to Wake Forest, transferred to a junior college, and then walked on under Bill Callahan at Nebraska and won player of the year in the Big 12.
How about that?
How about that? There's so many interesting things and so many interesting ways about doing things. But the point being is that they got lucky. They won the lottery. They got Joe Burrow, and all of a sudden things changed. Much like, Josh Allen falling to Buffalo and Patrick Mahomes falling to Kansas City. Now, these guys are coming from those areas. Those two players changed those franchises just like Joe Burrow is changing the Bengals franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really
one player.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's why I think to what the Giants are going to do and how the quarterback, of course, is going to be the more important thing. I remember going back to talking about whether or not Joe Judge should stay and the business side of things. And if you bring Joe Judge back, it's just going to be very flat with the season ticket holders and the PSLs and the Giant fan. And Steve is all about the business side of things. And you start over, there's at least a little bit of excitement because it's something new and it's the unknown and you're not bringing back the same guy. You're really going to tell me that Brian Daboll and the Bills' assistant GM is going to be the thing that lights the fan base on fire? Because there's no way. He may work out. Who knows? He may be the next great head coach in football. You don't know. As you mentioned, Zach Taylor had 2 bad years, and now he's got 1 game away from the AFC Championship game. It's just like you're going to move on from a guy after 2 years and then basically do this hot coordinator thing again. It just, I don't know. It would be surprising to me. It feels like another one of those hires that teams in smaller markets do. I don't know. And I would look at some of these other guys who have had experience. Like I'll name a guy. Now I know that they're talking to the GMs first. They haven't had any head coach interviews yet. Some other organizations doing head coach interviews and also GM interviews at the same time, which is a little weird. But a guy like Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris got his shot down in Tampa. It wasn't very good. But then has worked under other great head coaches, had an opportunity to be the interim head coach down at Atlanta, is now the defensive coordinator for the Rams, and they've got all these great players that rave about him. How come a guy like that isn't higher on lists? Like, why? Because he had a bad run in his early 30s with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
He's on a list, just like Todd Bowles is on a list. A lot of this comes down to, and I've told you this since Frank took over in Indianapolis, and he kind of let me inside just to see exactly everything that goes on and what comes across their desk. It's one thing to go in and build a defensive game plan and talk to 22 to 24 players on your defensive side of the ball and get them ready to go and play at a fever pitch, especially in the playoffs. It's easy to do that. It's not most easy, but it's a little bit more. It's easier to get them to be more focused and to do what they're there to do. But when you stand up there and you are the leader of the entire team, and then you have to make the decisions on Sunday, that's where guys get lost. Making those in-game decisions, those adjustments, both on offense, defense, and, of course, on special teams, and knowing when to go for it on 4th down and knowing how to manage. This is what Rob Saleh's got to learn. He's never had to do that before.
And maybe that's why I have this opinion that I have about the Giants going in this direction. There's a lot of growing pains there with Rob Saleh and that coaching staff in the beginning. Now, at the end of the year, I feel a little bit better about stuff. It felt like they were lost in the beginning.
So just like Zach Wilson's trying to figure it out, or Daniel Jones is trying to figure out his first year, the coaches are trying to figure it out as well. And, when you have players, let's say for Mike LaFleur, the offense coordinator of the Jets. All right, so you put this rookie quarterback out there. You think you got the greatest game plan. All of a sudden, he starts throwing the ball all over the place, throwing it into the ground, and not playing any good. And then all of a sudden, everybody questions the offensive coordinator. Is he good? Is he good? What does he do? And then you put Mike White in there, and boom, 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 up and down the field. You put Joe Flacco in there, boom, 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 up and down the field. So now the offense works.
Sure.
It depends on who's running the offense and who's running the plays. But he's learning. The quarterback's learning and the head coach is learning. And they're all learning different aspects of a new job title that there is a lot of pressure. And it's like, I was reading an article yesterday about the NFL and nepotism. Because the NFL is wrought with nepotism. It's just, everywhere. Front offices with owners and kids and brothers and aunts and uncles. And
the Giants, of course.
Well, the Bengals, everybody, every family-owned organization's got, family throughout the organization, all different sides of it. Some player personnel, some business. I mean, it's all over the place. But that's that's their right.
Bill Belichick's got his son on the staff.
It's their business.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want. They can run it any way they want. And this is what happens. And if you're in the coaching fraternity, you're going to get jobs because of either your dad did something or your uncle did something, and you're going to get hired somewhere by somebody, and you're going to start this trek to get to where you get to. And it's really, when you read the article, it's eye-opening. It's eye-opening how it all comes about. And I thought the article, I'll send it to you so you can read it, because a lot of it is about Mike Zimmer.
Oh, really?
And the Vikings and Gary Kubiak.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing with the kids and get this guy a job, give this guy a job, make him a coordinator. I'm like, and the players are like, who the hell is this guy to be a coordinator?
Right.
Well, he's the coach's son.
Yeah, that's not great.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of that goes on. And it also goes on in the front office, and usually from ownership down. Not from coaches up, it's ownership down. And if you are connected to the owners, you're basically untouchable. You're basically untouchable.
Yeah, that's not a healthy way to do things. It really is not.
You'd be surprised how big of an issue it is within the NFL. Now, the Fritz Pollard Alliance, who is advocating for black coaches and black GMs and offensive and defensive coordinators and more diversity in those ranks, it's like the third rail of the NFL. Like, they don't really want to talk about it because sometimes it works in their favor and sometimes it doesn't. And they say they just want people to get hired who are the right people for the job and who deserve the job. And I'm all about that. I believe in that 100%. So it's interesting when you think about the incestuous nature of the NFL and how these people are all tied together some way or another, how they know somebody or somebody makes a phone call. It's not really what you know in the NFL, it's who you know.
Well, that's why we're talking about these GM candidates and who they might hire as a head coach because of the previous relationships that they have. And you can't blame anybody for that, because if you're taking that GM job for the first time and you're hiring a coach, it's got to be someone you know and you trust, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that and when you hire 30 guys on your staff.
Yeah.
You got to make sure everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Don't you kind of feel like it's going to this, it's going to be this Bills deal for the Giants? I feel like it's trending in that direction. I feel like Brian Daboll is going to be the head coach, and this guy.
So they did, about 10 Zoom interviews with 10 different people, I guess, and they'll bring in 4. And they'll.
Well, they already had the second interview with Shane. Shane.
He's got to change his name. He's got to change the spelling of it.
I know. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
So they already had the second interview with him and the second interview with Poles. So those are the two guys that they brought back for second interviews already. So it's got to tell you something, right?
You figure it's got to be one of those two guys.
I would think.
And Poles is an African-American, so it fits the Fritz Pollard Alliance requirements and the Rooney Rule and all that other stuff. Hey, look, man, if you told me that they were going to hire this guy, Ryan Poles, and they were going to pair him with another Boston College guy, Brian Flores,
I think that'd be a good job.
I'd be happy about that.
I'd sign for that. But somehow the Shane Daboll thing I don't like.
Why is that? Why is it? Just because Daboll's a coordinator and never been a head coach before, and also he has lineage to the Patriots. It seems like everybody in the NFL has some sort of linkage to the Patriots.
Well, so does Brian Flores, and that doesn't bother me at all. I don't know. I just feel like when you are the Giants, and I understand they've been bad for a decade, and it goes back to that Steve Tisch business point that I was making earlier. You're not going to be able to sell the fan base on just another inexperienced hot coordinator name. Nobody's going to be excited about that. I mean, Rob Saleh, I think the Jets fan was excited about Rob Saleh because they kind of knew him.
Because of the success at San Francisco.
Yeah, and
he was in the Super Bowl,
demonstrative on the sideline and everything else.
All gas, no brakes.
Yeah, like you kind of knew him as a coordinator. You felt like he was going to come in and just was different than – he was the exact opposite of Adam Gase in every single way. But I don't know, just going to pluck the next hot coordinator again. It's just like this cycle that goes on and on and on. I'd like to see a guy.
It's a hamster wheel.
Yeah, hamster wheel of turds. But just like we said with the Mets and needing an experienced guy.
Go get the guy, and you got Buck Showalter. And how did the Met fan react to that?
They loved it.
Yes.
I just don't think this
How did the Knick fan react when we hired Tom Thibodeau?
Most of them loved it.
Yes, of course we did.
I think it's time for the Giants to I know you're not going to be able
to. Would that be Brian Flores?
Yeah, that would sort of fit the bill. Because there's not a lot of experienced guys that are available.
Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson is.
Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, I don't think Zimmer's going to get another shot. Like Leslie Frazier, Todd Bowles, Raheem Morris.
All those three guys that you just named are all second time around.
I think those guys have a better chance. I think Zimmer's too fresh. I don't think Zimmer's going to jump into another job.
What about Byron Leftwich?
I mean, there's another guy who's a first-timer. I mean, Jacksonville wants to hire him, fine. The Giants are at a stage in their organization where they need someone who's done it before to come in, and it seems like there's so many problems there with them that they need somebody who's done it before. They've seen some stuff to come in and clean it up, as opposed to learning on the job again.
If I had to list the problems that the Giants have, I would start on offense.
Yeah,
they have problems on offense. Now defense, they don't have an edge rusher. They don't really have anybody that gets after the passer. So we know what I believe that they have to fix on defense. I don't know how they'll do it. They may do it with one of their draft picks. They may do it via free agency with a short-term contract with somebody, who can get after the quarterback when you look at the free agent list. But offense to me, especially with the quarterback being hurt, and we don't know what the health of their present quarterback is going to be, or whether somebody comes in here and says, you know what, the Daniel Jones is over with. We're going with a stopgap guy, or we're going to draft somebody. So that's why whoever you hire as GM has got a mountain of a decision to make when it comes to the most important position on the field. And that's whether or not Daniel Jones is the guy, or they got to go out and get another one.
Yeah, it just feels like there's certain times in an organization's history where they need somebody serious.
So here's the thing about Zach Taylor and the Bengals, just to go back to him for 1 second. He gets the job because he's part of the Sean McVay staff. That was, Super Bowl 54, 53, whatever it was. He was the quarterback coach for Jared Goff. Mm-hmm. And, he was the hot, young coordinator who had all the answers. And then, of course, his first year, they go 2-14. He's got to navigate benching Andy Dalton for Ryan Finley, and then bringing Andy Dalton back that first year. And then Andy Dalton leaves after a successful run in Cincinnati. And then, lo and behold, Joe Burrow falls into his lap. But, they won only 6 games in 2 years. And just like here, people in Cincinnati wanted Zach Taylor fired. They wanted him out of there. 2 years, this losing continues. We're the worst franchise in the league. It's all the same stuff.
Yeah, and they also were down on the fact because he was supposed to be the next Sean McVay, and he came off of that staff.
Well, you could become the next Sean McVay when you have a healthy Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden you can call plays that the kid can handle, and he'll tell you what to call because now he's so in charge of everything. And then you add Jamar Chase to that group of wide receivers with Joe Mixon as a running back. You take a look at their offensive line. Just one in the break, I want you to look at their offensive line and look where everyone on that offensive line was either drafted or signed from going into Tennessee this weekend.
Okay.
And tell me if you think it's better or worse than the offensive lines that are currently here in New York.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.